Hello, everybody. This is Matthew McQueenie from Conabos, and we are ecstatic to host this really great webinar with our good friends and partners from Conscia. And we are going to show how you can now do headless personalization for Sitecore. So let me go around the virtual room here just to give a couple of introductions before we get started on this great topic. Dennis, would you like to go first?
Hey, I'm Dennis Augustine. I'm a partner at Conabos and a six-time Sitecore MVP, so I've been around the space a bit and do a lot of business development and strategy work with the organization.
Great. And then Sana and Jason?
Sure. Sana Remiki, CEO and co-founder of Conscia, and really excited to be here. Thank you for having us and giving us the opportunity to present our solution for Sitecore.
Hi, everybody. My name is Jason Yen, and I head up partnerships here at Conscia. And so I'll be taking you through a live demo as part of today's webinar.
Thank you all. So we will do that demonstration, but we'd like to give a little bit of background, both from the Sitecore point of view, and as well from Conscia and this term headless personalization point of view. So we're going to start with these questions, and we will also have Sana will bring up a couple of her slides as well. But we're going to ask, what is content personalization? We hear it all the time, but let's really dig in and get on the same page on what that is. And then when we add this word, in quotes, headless content personalization, what that means. So Sana, I'm going to bring up your piece here and allow you to speak to it.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So when we think about personalization, we actually think about it from a larger context of what really an experience is. What is a digital experience to begin with? And when we at Conscia think about the experience, we think of it in three of these terms. So it's the intersection of the customer, i.e. who you're presenting the experience to and what you know about that customer, the content, which is what you're presenting to the customer, and the context within which that information or that experience is presented to the customer that forms the overall digital experience. Now, embedded within those terms, if the way I've defined it, you can think about where relevance and personalization come into play, right? So a customer, you know something about them. So you're going to present something to them that is relevant to that customer. Now, whether or not it is, very much personalized to a very specific attribute of the customer, or just something that's personalized to the customer segment that they belong to, or the location they're coming from, or where they may be on the website or within their customer journey, that's just different levels of personalization or different levels of relevance. But at the end of the day, the goal is to present what is right for that customer at any given time. Now, when we think about headless personalization, it is a very specific way of doing personalization within a modern headless stack. So that's where the terms like composable come into play. So thinking about customer context and content again, in today's truly composable world, or for organizations that are building composable architectures, all of this information about the customer, the content, the context, all of it can come from a variety of different places. And that could be a headless CMS. It could be a product information management system. As far as content is concerned, from a customer standpoint, it could be that you are pulling information about the customer in a headless or structured API sort of way from a CDP, from a CRM, from any other place that gives you information about that customer. And that context has to be omni-channel in today's reality. We're not just dealing with web experiences. We're dealing with the entire customer journey, which can span from the customer being in store to the customer going to, on a website, to using their mobile phone, to receiving emails, to setting up their connected TV, to browse products and services about your brand. So really, the future is now composable. That's what Gartner is talking about. That's what the whole industry is talking about. Like, how do we deal with composability and headless architecture? So that's really just introducing the idea of where the term headless personalization comes into play.
And Sana, we hear the term mock a lot as well. And I believe you're a mock alliance ambassador. And I think that's another kind of terminology you might hear in this framework, right? Could you just quickly talk about what that is?
Yeah, mock. I mean, a lot of people think we're saying mock, like M-O-C-K, but we're actually saying M-A-C-H, which is really an acronym, yet another acronym for the industry. Mock is essentially defining a set of principles that software companies and organizations should adhere to build their products and services and software in a future-friendly fashion that promotes and encourages a best-of-breed type of mentality, as opposed to not giving organizations a choice to assemble their own stacks and having to purchase the software from a single vendor. So the acronym MOC stands for microservices, APIs, cloud native, and headless. So those are the principles that you essentially have to adhere to call yourself future friendly and composable.
That's great. So I'm going to take this back over and let's give a little bit of background on the Sitecore end before we discuss why and how Conscia is able to integrate into Sitecore's newer composable, I forget the word they use, Mac compatible, I forget the term, but Dennis, welcome. So
yes,
you've been working with Sitecore for many years. It doesn't belie your age, but in the time there, being an MVP, having access really behind the scenes to what's going on. If we look at this before composable, this pre-composable, how has this technology, this feature of personalization been handled within Sitecore up until now?
Sure. Sitecore has been synonymous with Sitecore XM, Experience Management and Experience Platform today. It started off some 16 years ago when I started working with the platform as the online marketing suite and the digital marketing suite, OMS, DMS, that got added onto the core CMS product. And that was where we got Sitecore Experience Platform. So it was really building up as during the rise of the monolithic approach, where we have the content platform is also the experience delivery platform, which is also the experience personalization orchestration sort of a platform. So that was an all-in-one approach. Because of that very nature, and I guess to really unify the job of the marketers, we also saw that experience personalization approach happen more tightly bound to the front end. So it really was personalizing the head, so to speak. So you would go into a component and pick a out of the box or a custom personalization rule that you had built. And then based on that rule, you might change whether you display the component or not, or change the data source of the component. So very much head personalization was the way. And typically a user would come to the website, and what would happen is events would get logged, and XDB, the experience database, would log those events, and the server would respond. So they were calls back to origin to do that personalization. So the user interface would call back to the to the content delivery servers, and then send back the personalized front end experience. And that was really where it was about. And you said pre-composable, so I'll pause there, because Sitecore also has some of their own options more recently for headless personalization, but a slightly different approach than that which is done by Conscia. But we can delve into that a little bit more once we get to understand the Conscia approach.
And so to that point, as we introduce the demo, why is now the time that or for Conscia to be able to connect with Sitecore?
Well, because composable is now. Since 2019, Gartner has been talking about businesses needing to move towards a more composable business approach and to adopt composable technologies in order to have a more agile digital experience. And so that is what Sitecore has done with the acquisitions of, first Content Hub, and which was usually Style Labs, and CDP, Personalized, Order Cloud, and all of their new headless composable stack, which those of us who've been working with the platform for a while are really embracing, because it is good to see the platform keeping pace with the direction of the marketplace overall. But since Sitecore has gone headless and composable, now is the time for all Sitecore customers to consider, and most Sitecore customers would have bought the platform because of things like personalization, because of marketing automation. Now that we're unbundling the monolith, you have to think about, what will I use to replace some of those things? And Sitecore customers right now are being, if you're considering an upgrade, you're being told perhaps the best path is to move from XP to XM, a side grade, to prepare you for a move to XM Cloud. And you'll note that I just removed the experience platform part, and I'm back at the beginning with XM. So you need to add something else to do your personalization. So now you've got to pick a fit for purpose tool to put on top of your core content platform to address that. We have various options. Sitecore's own CDP and Personalize, folks like Uniform, and good people over at Conscia, and obviously we're fans because we've worked with them on this integration for Sitecore. And I think it's important for customers to understand the differences between each of those approaches and which one of them is the better fit for them, because that's really what composability is all about. It's picking the right piece for you in your organization, the processes that you like to observe. And we want to really make sure that folks consider all of the options and what's the right fit for them.
And Sana, as we set up Jason for the demo, we've talked about the business case here, but there also had to be a concurrent technological framework aspect to allow these connections to take place, correct?
Yes, absolutely. If you don't mind putting up my slides one more time,
Sure.
I'll walk through exactly how we think about composable architectures, and within the context of personalization, how Conscia actually fits into today's reality of the composable architecture. So one of the challenges with the way composable architectures are currently defined is that there are really two layers to the architecture. One is you have your systems of record here in this picture below. So you have your CMS. In this case, you may have Sitecore as a Sitecore XM as your CMS. You may have some other legacy CMSs behind the scenes as well. You may have a promotions engine, a PIM, commerce engine, etc. And then you have these different front ends that you're trying to build, and you're trying to go omni-channel. So you may have web and mobile and connected TV, like we said before. And what's happening today is that a lot of the logic of who sees what content at what point within the customer journey, that is being handled within the front end. So you're literally hard coding the logic into one of the front ends. So there's no real central place where that logic is managed. It's not managed by the marketers at all. Actually, a lot of times it's managed directly by the developers, right? So developers are writing code essentially to connect to each of these backend systems, via APIs and hard coding the front end. And what that does is there is no real separation, once again, between your content and your presentation, right? If you put this type of logic, this decisioning logic around who should see what content in only one of those channels, what you're really doing is creating a fragmented customer experience. Sometimes some of our competitors also go and start adding tags and metadata right into the content itself, right? So right, go into the CMS and update the CMS and the content within the CMS with who should be seeing this content. So now you're making your content channel aware or context aware, which once again goes against the idea of headless. So reusing the content for different purposes and different channels and whatnot. So it's kind of going backwards to that web CMS type of thinking, which we were trying to get away from. So the way we think about the experience architecture is that it really should have 3 different layers instead of 2 layers, right? So you have your delivery layer, and that's all your touch points. You have your data and content, so that's your CDP and your CMS and all of your systems of record. But we're reintroducing the decisioning layer within the experience stack, and that decisioning layer is what we call the brain of the composable stack. So we think about building experiences that are intelligent. Yes, they will also be personalized, but they are intelligent. That means that they are relevant to the current context of the customer, to the point in the customer journey, that where they are at any given point, whether or not you think of that as personalization or just relevance, that's irrelevant. The point is that the experience needs to be intelligent. It needs to be defined by marketing teams and business teams. And we need one central location for those experiences to be defined. So who should see what content and where should be in one place. So in the context of Sitecore would be in the systems of record layer as far as we're concerned, so that bottom data and content layer. And we would sit on top of Sitecore's APIs to deliver the instructions essentially to the front end on what content from Sitecore the customer should see at this point. Now, one thing I want to mention, and this is always one of those points of contention and confusion between who we are and what maybe a front end as a service may be doing, or a visual composition layer in that top layer should be doing. So Sitecore Pages, for example, is a visual composition layer that could easily work with Conscia. So they're not mutually exclusive in any sense. In that decisioning layer, we're not generating HTML. We're not generating CSS. We are essentially giving the instructions to the front end that are in the form of a JSON response that can be consumed through an API by any front end whatsoever. And that's the point. The point is to keep the decisioning layer cleanly separated from the front end so that you're not siloing that logic in any one front end or any one content source. So with that, that's a mouthful. So I'm going to transition over to Jason, who can actually show us exactly how that works within Conscia.
Thank you. Jason, off to you.
Okay, thanks, Matt. So for this demo, what we've done is we've set up a couple of different content types within Sitecore, and we're going to be using these content types, which we have here, and showcasing basically personalization around a finance demo. And so as part of this finance demo, we'll show content related to articles, help, products, and promos. And what I'll take you through is I'm going to show you a couple of different personalized experiences that are tailored to the customer based on their context. Okay. And so in order to go through this, I mean, I think it makes sense to give you a bit of a breakdown in terms of the anatomy of the page itself. So this page is composed of what we call components. And so here we have a hero banner component, and each of the components on the page is mapped to Sitecore. So here we have another component for products and services. We have a component for help and support. And then we have two additional components. One is an A/B test component, which I'll get into in a bit. And then the last component is this trending articles in finance. And similar to what I showed you earlier within Sitecore, each of these components is mapped to one of the content types in Sitecore. Okay. Now, just coming back up to this page is basically our default page. And what I mean by that is you can see here in the top right-hand corner that we have this customer context card. And we've created this simply just to show you the customer's context that we're receiving behind the scenes. And so you can see here that there's no customer context. And so what's happening here is that each of the components on the page uses the customer context, or in this case, lack of customer context, and it returns a different variant of the content. Okay, so myself coming to this page, I may have a context, and Sana may have a different context, and this products and services component will basically generate a different content variant. And these combinations of content variants on the page is how we basically create a personalization using Sitecore. Okay, so to break down this page, this is the vanilla page. And as we go down, you can see that there's products and services like the Visa card, Visa checkout, overdraft. Coming to help and support, we can see some general help and support things like branch hours, getting your access card and credit cards. And then coming down to finance articles, there's just a couple of general articles. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm passing in the customer's context. And in this case, you can see that the customer context is the customer is a personal banking customer. Okay, and you can see that each of the components on the page reacts to that customer's context and puts out a new content variant, which is coming from Sitecore. And so here you can see that for a personal banking context, all of the products and services are now going and fetching different content from Sitecore that is relevant for that particular context. So here we have articles around savings, mortgages, and insurance. And coming down to help and support, again, the content that's being returned has now been tailored to reflect that segment. So we can see buying a home, debt consolidation, and TFSA. Okay, and again, the articles at the bottom have been updated as well based on that context. So as another example, what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the customer context, and instead of having a personal banking customer, I'm going to showcase it from the point of view of a small, medium business customer. And so again, each of the components on the page uses that context in order to drive new content from Sitecore.
Jason, sorry, I'm going to interrupt quickly. So just so you know how we're passing in this context into Conscia, because that may be something that you guys are thinking about. Currently, for this demo, the context is being passed through a URL parameter, which is then taken in through our API layer. So you're calling Conscia through the API, which takes in two things. One is the context of the customer. So who am I presenting this information for? And that could be a whole bunch of things. It could be their location. It could be, their customer segment, their device, whatever you want it to be. You define that within Conscia. And the second thing is, what am I providing this instruction for? So you're asking for a specific template, for instance, and a template's a combination of all of these components potentially that exist on a page, right? Or you could ask for a very specific set of components. You could say, I want, the header banner, and I want that the weekly specials to show up. So those are the only two things that the API needs from you to present back to you a set of instructions to provide some content or experience to that customer. And in real time, Conscia is going back to the backend systems, including Sitecore, and pulling just the right content that makes sense, that is relevant for this particular customer at this time. So I just wanted to make sure that that's clear, because you may be thinking that these seem like just prototypes and wireframes, and how do we know what are we doing here, right? So just making sure you understand that part.
Yeah, and we'll show you how all of those personalization is set up within the Experience Studio. One thing Sana mentioned is that the pages that I just showed you are being, we're actually getting the customer segment based on the profile. Now, one of the questions that always comes up is, what if I have customer information within an external CDP? And that's easy for us as well. I mean, what we can do is we can basically make a call out to that CDP. In this case, what we're doing is we're simply just passing in an email. And what that's doing is it's accessing that CDP, getting all of the customer information back. And again, you can see it here. And any of these pieces of customer information can be used to drive those personalization experiences. Okay. So now that I've showed you kind of 3 different flavors of the same page that has been personalized based on the customer context, what I'll do is I'll go into the Experience Studio and show you how all of this is set up. Okay, now the Experience Studio is Conscia's business user interface, and this is where you do all of the personalization. Okay, right now we're on the templates page, and as Sana mentioned, when you're doing personalization, you basically make a call, and that call simply includes the context, but it also includes which template you're looking for. The demo that I showed you is basically the finance template. And here, what you can see on the right-hand side is that these are all the different components within that finance template. And so you can think of a template as simply just a grouping of different components. Okay. Now, once we have that template set up, what we do is it's automatically exposed as part of this experience rules page. And as Sana mentioned earlier, when you're doing, I guess, direct to channel personalization, you have to do all of this hard coding. The interface that you see here basically eliminates all that, in the sense that this is where the marketers can basically set up their personalization across all of your different channels. And so one of the things that you'll notice here is that we have multiple channels, and each channel has a series of different templates. And these templates can be reused across channels. The other thing you'll see is that the components that are part of a template can also be reused across templates. And so as the customer is engaging with your brand across different pages and across different channels, they're getting a consistent experience. Okay, now I'll walk you through the personalization for some of the different components on the page. So the first one was the articles, which I'll just jump back to here. So this is the articles here. And the rules are set up in such a way that there are 3 different portions to a rule. The first portion is basically this general setup where you can obviously define the name of the rule. You can define whether a rule is a catch-all. You can define the priority of a rule relative to other rules, but you can also define a campaign code. And what this allows you to do is this allows you to basically associate different rules to a particular campaign so that you can look at analytics. Now, the other thing that you can do as part of this first portion of the rule is define whether it's an A/B test. And I'll show you an example of that in just a minute. Now, the second portion of the rule is the trigger condition. Okay, and this is where you start to define the context that you're looking for. And you can also define a start and end date so that these experience rules basically activate during that time frame. Now, as part of the trigger condition, you can basically use this canvas editor to then start to look at any of the context that you want to use as part of the trigger. So in this case, I may want to look for something like if the customer, let's say, is a personal banking customer, and if that customer is located within, say, the United States. Okay, and that will serve as the trigger condition, which then activates this next step, which is the target experience. Okay, and so this is where the target experience is basically connecting to Sitecore to go and look at the different records within the system. So here, if I just type in a quick search, I can see different records within Sitecore that I can then select, and that is what is returned as part of this component's experience. Now, this is an example of a static experience where we're hand selecting the records that we want returned. Now, there's also this notion of a dynamic experience where instead of picking individual records, we are basically defining a criteria that defines a set of records. And so I'll show you an example of that. And so if we look at something like product and services, I can look at personal. Okay. And just coming down to the trigger condition, you can see that here what I'm doing is this personalized experience will only activate when the customer is a personal banking customer. And the target experience, instead of picking records, here what we're doing is we're actually generating a criteria, okay, and which will match a set of records. And so if I just go and edit this, again, you can see this canvas editor where I can basically go and say, within Sitecore, only return records that are associated to this particular Sitecore template, which is finance products. I don't want anything that has business in the name because I'm dealing with a personal banking customer. And I want to return any records that basically have to do with TFSA, personal or mortgage. And so these criteria is basically what defines the set of records that are returned as part of this products and services component. Okay. Now, the last component that I'll talk about is this A/B testing component. And here you can see that we have a 1.5 sign-up bonus. And if I look at this guy, this is the same A/B component, but you'll notice that there's a different record there. Okay. And so this, again, is set up as another component within Conscia. And so here, if I just click on my finance promos A/B testing, I can look at January's rule. Okay, and what this does is when I set up this record, I actually select the A/B test option. And what it does is it changes the target experience setup. And what happens here is I can basically start to define different records that come back and the relative weighting in which they come back. So for this particular record, it's going to show up 50% of the time. And for this particular record, it's going to show up the other 50% of the time. Okay, now I can obviously go and add an additional record, change the weights to maybe like a 20, 20, 60. But in this case, I've set it up as a 50-50, where half the time I see this sign-up bonus and the other half the time I basically get this mobile app. And again, these records reside within Sitecore. We're not taking anything out of Sitecore and putting it to Conscia. We're simply just using the APIs for Sitecore to basically showcase this information. Now, as part of analytics, you obviously want to see whether the analytics are having an impact in terms of what you're doing. What we are able to do is marketers have the ability to configure the analytics dashboards. As part of the project onboarding, we can configure analytics dashboards to understand the performance of the campaigns and basically perform rapid experimentation. This is a sample dashboard that we did for another project where we're looking at a coffee-related A/B test. And so all of the interactions with the customers are captured and rolled up as part of our Intel module. And so marketers have the ability to basically see all of this information and use that information to then course correct or make adjustments to their A/B testing campaign. And with that, I will hand it back over to Matt.
Sure. Thank you, Jason. I'm gonna put up one question as we go to our next slide, because I always want to answer those as they come in here. So we have the question: can the experience logic be set by the citizen users via configurations, or does it need IT training? Would you like to take that, Sana?
Yeah,
Sure.
yeah, I can answer that question. Hey, Javis, nice to see you here. So in terms of the kind of configurations we're talking about, I mean, we should break those down a little bit here. So what Jason just showed was the marketing and business users interface to set up the business logic, the experience logic for who should see what, when, and where. All of that is 100%, business users and marketing users. Now, in terms of the dashboards that you're looking at, so for analytics, right, and the configurations you need to create for in the insights that you want about the experiences and the campaigns that you're creating. That is done at project onboarding time. We have APIs that you can use to configure all of the different types of computations that you need to be able to view within those dashboards. And then there is a separate level of configuration to make sure that those computations that you've created, such as conversions or revenue or revenue by segment, and all of those types of things that you've configured within Intel to be those computations, they can appear within the dashboard in a nice visual fashion. So that level of configuration is something that IT and digital teams would be involved in prior to launch. Anything after launch, however, is 100% business user configuration. And that's the point. On an ongoing basis, we want to put business and marketing teams in control. That's not to say that IT and digital teams are not involved at any point, but at some point you want to pass that control over to marketing teams so that on an ongoing basis, they can set up their campaigns, they can do experimentation independent of the IT team. Hope that answers the question.
And I love that citizen users name, right? It's like citizen developers, and it evokes this low code, no code we hear a lot about now, right? Right. So maybe let's go to Dennis on this one. He always can see the future. So Dennis, you're a part of a lot of these customers who are making this transition in the Sitecore world from what was a monolith and all-in-one to this composable future. Why don't we go to you first? What can we tell Sitecore customers right now who are in that pre-composable state? What to expect about this evolution, as you like to use the word, hopefully, or what can they expect over the next year, 2 years on how to handle their operations and technology?
Okay. Well, first of all, I think they can expect that the legacy platform isn't going away immediately, but we also know that it's, for many of them, they've invested many years in that platform, and so it's time now to start thinking about the transition. And I think you're so right, Matt. That's why I keep saying you want to evolve about platforms like Conscia. You can start where you are with with the tools that you have, and start to make that gradual transition. But I think the first things, the transition can happen in one of two ways. Organizations can try to make a wholesale change to headless in one fell swoop. I can think that they can expect some pain if they'll try to do that all at once, because those things are exhausting, cost a lot, you will have a lot of pain. Or you can start to take a step back and to think about, what will the people on my team start doing? What are the problems I'm trying to solve? And then address what elements do I need in my stack to address, to tackle that along the way. And that's the wiser, certainly, path forward. I think that we can expect to see a lot more cooperation and alignment, honestly, between vendors, which is something new. This is why, Conscia and others are joining, like the Mock Alliance. And that does mean that you have a greater number of choices. And those are choices to, again, fit the people and processes and problems that were the higher order things. So now that we'll have more choices, that the monolith is being decomposed, it's the ideal time for folks to take the step back and think about, what is the overall architecture of my digital experience? How will my people work within this framework? Think about things like Sana brought up about the maintainability about your experience orchestration. If it's happening in one place, is it as maintainable as in this other spot? Who will be doing that? And once we work through those issues, you'll be able to find the platform pieces that fit best. But I think you can expect a lot more options. And with a lot more options, I think that raises the importance, and it's a shameless pitch for us over at Conabos, the importance of consulting an architect, because now you've just gotten the Deluxe Lego kit with all of these wonderful bricks and pipes, and you're told to go build a building. And I think it takes, you need to take a pause, and think about how you want to live before you start putting pieces together.
And to that point, Sana, you've worked with, Sitecore is not the only monolith. So you've worked with customers making the transition on other systems even. Are there any things you can surface up from experiences, best practices? Maybe it's not as, it's going to be okay type of thing. Could you just give some of your
Hush, hush. It's
recollections
going to
on
be
that?
fine. Yes, absolutely. And I think that we kind of live in a very divisive world where we think that, you're either headless or you're composable, or you're monolith. Just like you're either on the left or you're on the right, and it's really not as simple as that. Most organizations are in a transitional state, right? And a lot of the monoliths or the all-in-one suites that these customers currently have within their experience architecture are also taking the steps to decompose those platforms and to bring composability into their own worlds as well. So we're in the world of transition. We're not on the left or the right now. So we have to recognize that as an industry and welcome that change, right? Welcome with open arms the monoliths, the so-called monoliths that are taking the steps to decompose those solutions and open up their architectures and break things down, because that provides a practical roadmap for customers to take the necessary next steps to modernize their systems, right? So I don't think the change is going to happen overnight, and that's exactly why we've built Conscia to work with any backend system or integrate with any backend system that offers APIs and is able to provide a structured response to us, right? And that doesn't necessarily mean that it's only members of the MOC Alliance. They don't have to be. They just have to provide an API, and they have to be able to give us the data in a structured format so that we can use that data and do the orchestration that is necessary to build those experiences.
We always like to say at Conobos that you don't have to go from an all-in-one to all at once. And I think that's one of the benefits of this architecture, is that in road mapping exercises, you can sit with decision makers who might work in a company that's on top of a monolith and say, hey, let's do a tactical campaign website on this platform to try it out. A proof of value, right? We've heard proof of concept, but now you can do proof of value with these solutions. Sorry, I'm getting called here. Or let's try one of our, if we're a conglomerate, let's try one of our brands on a commerce platform. And it allows you to really try out in real time with real results on a lot of these. So you don't have to feel as though the weight of the entire transition is on you to change out everything, right? And I think that's one of the really neat aspects of this technology and architecture. We have a few questions. So I think why don't we put them up? Always love the questions. It means there's a lot of interest here. So I'll put this slide up, get our questions. So this one is from James Patillo. Is there any performance report that's available? Using your example, is there a way to see how many users saw the business version of the content versus the personal version? Can you see and share the results of A/B tests?
Yes. Short answer is yes. And I'll give you the long answer as well. So the long answer is that we have what we call the Track API that you could use to track the customer signals and interactions across multiple devices, multiple channels, etc. And what you are tracking essentially is what the customer is looking at and in what context they were looking at that content. And that content is not just the entirety of a page or a full template, but at a very granular level, specifically what maybe product they clicked on or what content item they clicked on, and we're tracking essentially all the way to order, like in checkout. So once we have all of this information in one place, which Jason referred to earlier as this module called Intel, that backs up the personalization engine, essentially. What you're able to then do is run a whole ton of different computations, right? And those computations could be, okay, so tell me how many people are looking at this particular content, or how many different types of customer segments were looking at this type of information, or this type, variant A versus variant B. So you can run computations at different levels of granularity, at a content level, at a variant level, at a customer level, at a customer segment level, at a brand level, whatever information you're able to send to Intel through that track API, we're tracking it. Now, once we track that, you run your computations, we set up the dashboards the way you need to see them at onboarding time. One of the features that is coming shortly is for you to actually create those dashboards also through configuration yourself, but that's still, I would say, a few months out at this point, but it only needs to be done once, so that we left that sort of level of control towards the end, since it's still, development and IT teams that need to set that up anyway. Yes, so to answer your question, absolutely, you'd be able to report on all the different aspects of what the customer is looking at within the experience.
Thank you. And thank you, James, for the very good question. I do want to say we were supposed to do this webinar before the holidays. So we do still wish you happy holidays and a happy new year, but I did not change out that slide. This from Naeem. How to configure Conscia to pull the Sitecore components from a template?
I think
I'm assuming this question is around, like, how do we actually connect to Sitecore and basically make that binding? It probably makes sense to show it quickly because it is very fast.
Sure.
So let me share my
All right,
screen.
let me pull it up here. I think, yeah, there you go. All right.
Okay. And Naeem, I hope that's what you're asking. So within the Conscia Experience Studio, the first thing you obviously do is you create a connection. And so creating a connection is simply just creating a new record within this view. And what you do is you basically select from the out of the box set of connectors. And so obviously you pick Sitecore here. Now, what you do is you simply just put in your API key and then the instance that you're connecting to. And as soon as you save this, this creates that connection to Sitecore. Now, when you create a component, if you were to create a brand new component, what you do is you actually leverage that connection. So say in the articles component that we had, you basically put in which component type it is. And in this case, I'm picking a static record type. And what you do is you basically pick which connection to Sitecore it is. So if you happen to have many different connections, maybe like to different environments within Sitecore, then you can basically pick which connection you want here. Now, if you're doing something like a static record component where you're binding it to one particular Sitecore template, that's where you would use this guy here, where it's actually looking, this list is actually coming from Sitecore. So these are all of the Sitecore templates that you can select and bind to. So in this case, what I'm doing is I'm binding it to the finance articles. And so when we show the personalization rules for that, and you're doing that type ahead search, I see all of the records within finance articles. The other thing too is that depending on the nature of what you're connecting to, you can also define a custom display template. And that basically allows you to basically see the record. In this case, what I'm doing is I'm basically just outputting a name and the image, and then I think the description of that. So you can change this as needed in order to make more of a visual display so that the marketers can basically see what that looks like. And again, setting up a connection, setting up the component, these are all one-time things. and it literally takes just a couple of minutes.
Great. Well, I did put a note to Naeem about, hopefully that was the info he was seeking, but of course you can contact any of us for further information on that. We also do have a very nice comment from a previous question asker. Not a question, but I love how the use of this tool can help with identifying data gaps and informing data strategy via a customer experience-centered mindset. There's your testimonial, Sana. Put that on
Thank
the
you so
website.
much. Thanks, Rafiq. Appreciate that.
Okay, we have one. Actually, we do have another here. Do you support fetching content from a Sitecore custom content resolver? So the interesting thing here is you can see how important the Sitecore community is, and the questions, and they have very good questions that pertain to this transition. Is this something that we can answer right now, or?
I think this is one of those questions that kind of goes beyond both Jason and I, and we'd probably need an architect to answer it properly. But what I'm guessing here is that the custom content resolver is some sort of a GraphQL endpoint. I think maybe Dennis, you know more about this. Is that what we're talking about here?
It would be most likely they're talking about something that on request will go and get control which content item is being returned based on that. I suppose that in this case, we are talking about here, they're using the GraphQL endpoints, I believe, in this demo you're attaching to. You can also attach to different APIs. So if you're handling that before the content item gets retrieved, then I suppose that your item would still relate, but we'd have to go through that. I guess it's a good use case. And if you want to shoot us a message a little bit later on, we'll get into the proper answer for that. I think you're right, Sana. It's a question for one of the architects to tackle.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. Perfect. Yes, we can definitely take that offline and discuss further, bringing the right folks on our end.
All right, thank you, Nabil. We'll get you an answer about that.
We absolutely will. So Naeem did say that was what he was looking for, so thank you for that acknowledgement. I do not see, okay, so I think Nabil did say it's a custom code in the back end that collects data from different content types and from search indexes. So that definitely sounds right up the alley there. We could probably go offline, online.
Totally.
With
So
that one.
anything that can be accessed via an API and provides a JSON response to us, we can connect to. So one of the things that we didn't mention yet is that we have integrations with two types of integrations, right? One is customer data integrations, right? So you're learning something about the customer in real time from one of the CRMs or CDPs or whatnot, and the other is a content integration. So you're actually allowing marketers to pick certain types of content, either dynamically or statically or through AI or whatnot, right? So those are the types of integrations that we offer out of the box. Now, there's there's a third type of integration, which we call the universal connector, which essentially allows you to put in an API key and the all of the authentication information and tokens essentially for any system whatsoever, right? So you can connect to pretty much whatever you want to connect to, and would be able to retrieve the JSON response from that connection in real time and connect it and retrieve that information, pull out the necessary elements, and pass those elements on to other services that we're calling. An example would be, somebody asked something about a Microsoft, Dynamics CRM, right? So that would be called specifically with just an API call. You get the data back, you pull out using JavaScript expressions, the information that you need from that response, and then you set the context of the customer based on that response. And that context can then be consumed and responded to by any of the content components, such as the Sitecore component, or if it's commerce tools or Salesforce or whatnot. These components can now take advantage of this enriched content or context about the customer, and you can set rules based on those things as well. So Conscia essentially is not trying to create any kind of tight coupling with any of the composable platforms. We've created a generic enough platform that can connect to any backend service the same exact way. So to create a brand new integration for us, it's literally a matter of 1 to 3 days, depending on how much control and exposure you want to give to the business teams within the front end. If it's not much configuration that's required from the business teams, such as in the case of a CRM or a CDP, that's 1 day. If you want to expose nice interfaces for them to, pick and choose content, and you want to display the content in a nice way within Conscia, it's still done in a pretty streamlined way, but it may take 3 days to get all of that set up on our end. And there's also something coming soon that is going to allow our partners to create those types of fancy business user interfaces within Conscia on their own, just as configuration, without writing any code, without deploying any code whatsoever. And that's the point. We don't want to create plugins that require custom development. We're creating configuration, and that's kind of the essence of composability that we're trying to reach with the platform.
Well, that's great. Well, Sana, you were recorded saying 1 to 3 days, so that's impressive.
Absolutely.
It makes it more impressive. We are reaching the end here, but why don't we just give quick closing remarks? Dennis, Sana, I'm going to put this out to go without saying, it's on LinkedIn there for anybody who would like to get in touch further, but just on perhaps what our audience can take from this, next steps. Dennis, would you like to go first, and then we'll finish with Sana?
Absolutely. I'll leave it with consider your options. So there are in the composable world, in this new kind of more interactive mock world, there are many options for everybody with different approaches. Will have seen here how over at Conscia they're doing that experience orchestration. Standing in between the content and the presentation layer, is that the right place for you to be doing it with your organization? I think the answer for many will be yes. And you should consider which platform is going to really suit your purpose best. So we'll leave it with that. Consider your options, consult an architect, those people like, again, Conobos, who deal with several really good partners like Conscia and others, and we'll have a chat about what's the right fit for you.
Sana?
Absolutely. Yep. I've already said a lot, but I guess at the end, as an ambassador of the Mock Alliance, I would say, composability is the way to go. That is the future. We should welcome all organizations, big and small, who are trying to go down that path, including Sitecore. That's an amazing shift. Very, very happy to work with Sitecore customers who have taken the brave next step towards composability. And as a CEO of Conscia as well, which is very closely aligned with what I just said here, we've really built a platform here to enable your teams to go down that path, and also very, very proud to be partners of Conobos. We choose our partners very carefully. Dennis knows that from our earlier conversation. I'm almost Hitler-like when it comes to picking partnerships. Not a good reference. Sorry, it's bad. But we want to make sure that the partners that we're working with align with our values, with our vision, and Conobos is definitely one of the top ones on our list.
Great. Well, thanks so much, Jason. Thank you as well. And if there's any questions, we're here. We're here to answer them. Appreciate everybody watching. Have a great day.
Take care. Thank
Thanks,
you.
everybody.
Thank you.
All right.